Hello everyone, it's time once again for In the Studio. Let's dive in. In the past, I've done a couple videos where I've talked about using different or odd loop lengths to create interesting polyrhythms, and this can be an extremely powerful technique. But in those videos, the examples have been on drums or percussion or maybe an ARP sequence. I'll put those videos up there if you want to check them out. But in this video, I want to show you how you can apply a similar technique, but to longer sustained melodic sequences like pads or strings, maybe a sustained bass or drone, things like that. So the project that we're in now is a track that I'm currently working on. I've applied this technique to this pad here, and I thought it was a perfect time to show you this example or this technique in action. And we're going to be focusing on this pad here, but let's have a listen to a little piece of this track and then we'll dive right in. Here we go. Okay, and here's what it sounds like soloed. Okay, all right, so in order to show you how I've actually applied the technique, we need to head into the piano roll so I can show you the MIDI version of this pad, okay? All right, so what you want to do here is to choose an odd note length. So instead of the standard 2 bars, for example, in this particular case, I've chosen 2 bars and 1 beat. So 9 beats. And you can experiment with different note lengths. It just needs to be kind of an odd, not so standard note length. So, you know, I don't choose a half bar or 2 bars. It needs to be something different. So I've chosen 2 bars and 1 beat for the note length, and I've just kept the note length the same as I've changed notes. And then in this case, I've reset it at the end of 8 bars. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can keep it going and keep the polyrhythm vibe just rolling along. And I've definitely done that many times in the past, and that's a completely, you know, valid option. But sometimes I like to reset it, you know, at the end of 8 bars or maybe 16 bars or maybe even 32 bars, or maybe I'll do it at the end of 12 bars. It just depends on what I'm doing and the track and everything else. But in this case, I went for 8 bars. And because the notes are changing at different spots in the bar, so we're changing at beat 2 here, beat 3, beat 4, that simple variance, when you're listening to the track and you're hearing this pad, it's much less predictable. It's way less predictable, rather. And it's a little bit harder to kind of pick out where the loop is starting over again because of this kind of polyrhythm type of vibe. It just creates a much more intricate and complex type of sound, in my opinion. Just by this simple move here of, you know, using a 9 beat loop length rather than 2 bars. And because the other melodic elements in this track are very kind of predictable and doing a pretty, you know, basic kind of pattern, the interplay between the other melodic elements is quite interesting. So I have this ARP here, which is playing 1 note, a simple little rhythm, looping over a bar. Okay, and then I have this other pad, which is sitting below the one that we're focusing on, and it's doing a basic, you know, a held note of G for 4 bars and a held A note for 4 bars, and that's just standard going back and forth. So we have those two kind of basic little melodic sequences, and then when you throw in this polyrhythmic pad, it just creates this interesting kind of, you know, back and forth between those three little melodic sequences. One thing to note here is you don't want to go crazy with this technique. If you try to apply this technique to a bunch of different sounds, like a bunch of drum patterns, maybe in your ARP and like your pad like this, it's going to become chaotic and confusing and just all over the place really quickly. So you need to pick the right elements to apply these this type of technique to. So maybe I would keep it to maybe one or two sounds in your track. But in the right circumstance, on the right sound and the right track, this little technique can go a long way and be very, very powerful. So what I've done here is I bounced out a standard, a more standard version of this pad. It's the same exact sound, but instead of the little polyrhythm, it's just changing every 2 bars. Okay, and so let's do a little comparison. We'll listen to these two, side by side, so you can hear the difference that little polyrhythm technique has. So let's turn everything else on. Let's listen to these two back and forth. Here we go. Okay, so this pad version 2 here, the one that's looping just over 2 bars, or the notes are changing every 2 bars, it still works, it still sounds good, it still fits in the track. But in my opinion, the pad version 1, where we've applied that polyrhythm, I think it's much more, it's just more interesting. I like the way that it's talking to and interplaying with the other melodic elements much better. And as you can see, extremely easy to apply. So hopefully you found this video useful. That's it for today. If you have a question or anything, drop it in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thanks everyone, and take care. Cheers.